Hey everybody, it's me, Kristen. I just finished reading my personal development for the day and I wanted to share with you because this stuff is incredible. I just started the chapter called um, Debunking the vulnerability myths. And she talks about all her research and the questions she would ask people as like what is vulnerability, and she starts to define it a little bit. And the myth is that vulnerability is weakness, um, whereas however, when the general populace observes people being vulnerable, they identify the people being vulnerable as courageous, as like, wow, that's amazing, and they're the most moving people you've ever seen, right? Like being vulnerable is movement, um, and it is emotional exposure, which I think is obviously why it's so scary, because we open ourselves up to criticism and well, potential criticism that may never come, but it's still scary, right? Because anybody can do it. And the world is so mean out there these days, isn't it? Like everybody's got an opinion and everybody's a critic and everybody has their rights. And it's just like, okay, but I saw a friend post recently. It's like, can we just go back to the little rule that says if you can't say something nice, don't say it at all? And I loved that post because that's how I've been feeling for the last like year. But anyway, she asked, when she was collecting her data, she asked people to finish this sentence, and it says vulnerability is blank. And some of the replies that I highlighted were sharing an unpopular opinion, because I have a lot of unpopular opinions right now. I'll tell you what. Standing up for yourself, that's kind of scary. Saying no, starting my own business, stepping up to the plate again after several strikeouts. That was the worst. Playing softball. That was just that. Yeah, it's scary for all you softball people out there. Presenting my product to the world and getting no response, and that kind of is a double-edged sword. Not double-edged sword. There's like two swords for me, because I do the health coach thing, but I'm also a singer. So like, and my product as a singer is me, and there's nothing. Well, there might be, but for me as a singer, it feels like there's nothing more vulnerable than being a singer, because you are your product, your voice. Like there's nothing you can change about it. People either like you or you don't, and there's nothing you can do. Standing up for myself and for friends when someone else is critical or gossiping. So maybe something we should take away from that is don't gossip. And constructive criticism is great, but just tearing people down, get over yourself. Asking for forgiveness and having faith. Vulnerability sounds like truth and feels like courage. Truth and courage aren't always comfortable, but they're never weakness. And then this other question she asked is, how does vulnerability feel? And the one that I highlighted was, it's taking off the mask and hoping the real me isn't too disappointing. I highlighted another one. Taking off a straitjacket, being all in, freedom and liberation. Vulnerability is like being naked on stage and hoping for applause rather than laughter. Isn't that crazy? These are just so poignant. This one was great. I know it's happening when I feel the need to strike before I'm struck. And then she goes through the etymology of the word vulnerable, and which is fascinating to me. I love that stuff. And the definition includes capable of being wounded and open to attack or damage. And then the definition of weakness by Merriam-Webster is the inability to withstand attack or wounding. And she goes off on how they're so clearly different, and they're not the same at all. But I started to read that and realize how easily they are to connect, because sure, it's not, maybe being vulnerable isn't weakness in and of itself, but being vulnerable opens yourself up to being perceived as weak, because if you get hurt, if you get struck, if you get wounded, then you are weakened, right? So I think there is a correlation there. but obviously they're different. And then the last thing that I kind of want to talk about is one of the things she says here, is here's the crux of the struggle. I want to experience your vulnerability, but I don't want to be vulnerable. Vulnerability is courage in you and inadequacy in me. I'm drawn to your vulnerability, but repelled by mine. And that is probably true for most people. I guess as an artist, I have been exposed to the idea of being vulnerable more than most. That's just something we have to do in order to communicate effectively with people through our art. So vulnerability, when I read this one line, vulnerability is courage in you and inadequacy in me. No, it's just, for me personally, I don't identify with that statement. I identify with vulnerability is scary because it's dropping your arms. It's, even if you're not wearing any armor, it's shedding your armor. It's being exposed. It's dropping your guard. And that's scary because when you drop your guard, you know anybody can get you. Anybody. It's not even that hard. And that's a scary place to be in. I'm very fortunate that I have a lot of friends that I don't have to worry about that with, but I just moved away from them all. So this will be an interesting part of my journey, right? Is continuing to be vulnerable without the safety net of my closest friends. I have my closest friend here. He moved with me. But the group of guys, you know. So it's just food for thought. This video was shorter than last time, which is great. But yeah, what is vulnerability to you? What is vulnerability? That's a hard word to say. What does vulnerability feel like? Just think about that and start practicing. Have a good day, guys. Bye.